Hey everybody, it's Mother Goose 27 and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have been very open with you guys. Avatar: The Last Airbender is my all-time favorite series, hands down. Doesn't matter what it is. Live action, anime, cartoon, doesn't matter. Avatar: The Last Airbender, best of the best. I have watched this show I've missed sometimes, but almost every 6 months since it aired. But something I've seen a lot throughout the community is people talking about the final fight and how they believe it should have been Zuko who fought his father. And I will give them some credit. Throughout the show, the lens that we see Ozai is mostly from Zuko. Even when we see him in other instances, it's still in regards to Zuko. For example, one of the very first times we hear about the Fire Lord is when Iroh's talking to the crew, explaining how Zuko got his scar. And so thematically, I think it would have been an interesting fight. There would have been a lot of history behind it, and it would have made sense. But I do not think it would have made more sense than having Aang fight Ozai. Zuko says it himself. That's Aang's fight. So I just want to take a look at the season finale and just kind of share some of my feelings, some of my thoughts on why I think it went down the way it was supposed to. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Air Nomad genocide. While it was not Ozai who initiated the genocide, Ozai represents the bloodline that did. And yes, Zuko does as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. Ozai represents everything evil within the Fire Nation. This wasn't just a fight between the Avatar and an evil tyrant. This was a fight between the last Airbender and the leader of the nation that wiped out his people. But yes, it is also about the Avatar facing an evil tyrant, which brings me to my next point. The Fire Nation has represented on balance in the world for the past 100 years. Ozai is that symbol. If the Fire Nation was one man, it would be Ozai. While on the other hand, Aang represents balance. So these are two opposing forces, and there's actual depth to why they are fighting. Now, one of the main reasons I see that people talk about the Aang and Ozai fight and why they feel like why Zuko should have fought him was because they feel like Ozai wasn't really that great of a villain. I completely disagree. I think Ozai was an amazing villain. He was an almost faceless villain. We didn't actually get to see his face really until season 3. Now there was an episode, I can't remember off the top of my head if it was in season 1 or season 2. I believe it was in season 2, but where we find out what happens to Fire Lord Azulon, and we see his funeral. We do kind of see Ozai's face, but it's from very far away. But we don't really get to see him until season 3. And he's just kind of a bad guy. And people don't like him as a villain because he's just a bad guy. But I think people forget that Ozai is what Zuko would have become if he didn't have Iroh. He's what Azula would have become if she wasn't stopped. The same torment, the same family drama, the same indoctrination into this idea that the war was the Fire Nation's gift to the rest of the world that Azula and Zuko were put through. Ozai was put through that too. That same brainwashing, everything, he went through that. He was just at a different stage in life than his children were. And throughout the whole series, we get to hear about how bad of a person he is. We see him through the lens of other people, but sometimes people's perception of others isn't correct. Sometimes they have their own biases, sometimes they lie. But when it comes down to Ozai, all of the bad things that people said about him were true. He was a tyrant. He was an abusive father. He was an incredibly powerful firebender. All of these things are true. All of these things we learn about him throughout the series. And when it all comes down to that final fight between Aang and Ozai, we see it is all true. Those segments when we see him in season 3, we see that all of those things are true. He is this person. They tell Ozai's story. They show Ozai as a character before we even see Ozai. And I love I think there's a lot more to his character than people really give him credit for. But again, the final fight is exactly how it needed to be. Aang fought Ozai, Zuko and Katara fought Azula, Iroh and the White Lotus reconquered Ba Sing Se, Sokka, Suki, and Toph took down the airships. If any of them had failed, the war might not have ended there. Hear me out. Obviously, if Aang didn't beat Ozai, the Avatar would have been dead. Dead or captured. He might have taken him prisoner so the Avatar wasn't reborn. If Zuko didn't beat Azula, she was the Fire Lord. Ozai had become the Phoenix King and he'd passed the mantle of Fire Lord onto Azula. She would have continued the war. If Iroh and the White Lotus hadn't have retaken Ba Sing Se, potentially the soldiers there would have given up the city when Zuko took control, or alternatively, they would have been strong believers in the Fire Nation's gift to the world. They would have tried to hold Ba Sing Se, which eventually I do think it would have fallen with Zuko and the Avatar and the Fire Nation now under Zuko's control. They probably would have taken Ba Sing Se. It would have been a long fight. Ba Sing Se is not an easy place to conquer. And finally, if Sokka, Suki, and Toph hadn't have destroyed the airships, yeah, the war may not have continued, but those airships would have just flown through. They would have just flown through and destroyed so much of the Earth Kingdom. Aang could not have stopped those ships and Ozai at the same time. There's so much depth behind this ending, and again, it happened exactly how it needed to happen, and everyone played separate but important parts to it, and that's why I love its ending so much. Now let's talk about the alternative. Let's talk about if Zuko had fought Ozai. We have two outcomes here. Let's talk about the more likely outcome first. I'm sorry, I don't think Zuko could have beat Ozai. I think it would have been a beautiful fight. It would have been animated amazingly. It would have looked fantastic. But he would have lost. Let's be real. Zuko is an amazing firebender. But so is his father. Let's just look at the facts here. Aang lost. I mean, he didn't lose in the end, but he lost. He was about to die. And if he hadn't have accessed the Avatar state, he would have lost and have been killed or captured. And so I really do not think Zuko could have won the fight. Zuko says it himself. He thinks Iroh's the only one besides the Avatar who could beat Fire Lord Ozai. No. Look at how cute Azula is. Let's talk about the alternative if Zuko had won, though. Just like with Iroh, history would have looked at it as a son killing his father to gain power, because, I mean, we all saw Zuko was a pretty big proponent of killing the Fire Lord. Zuko probably would have had to kill his father. Now, who knows? Maybe it was Zuko and Team Avatar. They were able to capture him. But without Aang and the other members of Team Avatar, and they had to capture him, but without Aang, they would not have been able to take his firebending away. Don't do it. Hey. Don't do it. So like I've been saying, it had to have been Aang to fight Ozai. Now, I want to talk about the Zuko-Azula fight, because that was just as important. Ozai and Azula represented what the Fire Nation was. They were tyrants, they were dictators, they were murderers, they were oppressors. And Ozai and Azula, they embodied that, and they wanted to continue it. Alternatively, Iroh and Zuko represented what the Fire Nation could be. Now, we see Iroh after he's transformed. Like, he's still a Fire Nation general when the series starts, but he is a changed man. The only reason he's really still there is to help Zuko. But he went through this journey himself. We hear about it, but we never really see it on screen. Zuko, on the other hand, we do get to see his transformation. We do get to see him become a Fire Nation prince to a genuinely good person. I mean, he's still technically a Fire Nation prince, but a good person. And so they represent what the Fire Nation could be. They represent the hope and future of the Fire Nation. And so when Azula and Zuko fight, it's not just, oh, who gets to be the Fire Lord? It is a fight for the future of the Fire Nation, and it is a fight for the future of the world. And so to just sum this whole thing up, I made notes. I've tried to keep this structured, but my brain just kind of likes to spit words out. But to sum this all up, yes, Zuko and Ozai had history. Yes, it would have been great to see them get to fight. Thematically, it would have made sense for Zuko to be the one to face Ozai in the end. But I do not think it makes as much sense as what we got. I stand by this. I've said it before, and I will say it again. I genuinely think it is the perfect ending. And I don't think it would have been as good. I don't think it would have been as satisfying any other way. Now, alternatively, potentially, we could have had Aang and Zuko fight Ozai. That would have been very interesting. But again, I really think that Zuko-Azula fight was just as important as the Ozai-Aang fight. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to join the flock. And I will see you in the next one. Mother Goose out.